Now, in the last video, we managed to make a simple routing system where we can choose which plugins run on which page, which is essentially a kind of routing system. So with that in mind, what we need next now is to be able to load files, to be able to grab the current plugin path. Now that's going to be very important because for things like loading classes and all that, it should happen automatically, so you don't have to specify very absolute paths to your classes. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. So I want to be able to know, let's say we have this home plugin here. Now I want to be able to know which folder this plugin is in without having to specify the current folder. So even if I change the folder that this plugin exists in, I should still be able to know where this thing is coming from. So normally what you would do, for example, let's go up in here and I'm going to go to my plugins folder, and right here on homepage, right? So I'm going to go to plugin.php over here. Now we can remove this for now, we don't need that. But what I want to do here is just echo something not within these functions here, but just outside here. So there's this function called dir, like that, which enables you to echo the current directory of this file that you are in. So if I do that and come back and refresh the page, you see it tells me exactly where this this file is in. So this is all nice and good because I can easily just go in there. Now what I want this for is to just grab the folder, the plugins folder itself. Okay, so regardless what the plugin folder is, here there's plugins that we are sure of, but then there's home dash page here, which is the actual folder that this plugin belongs to. So this can be particularly handy if, for example, I want to load CSS files into my current plugin folder. Then I can just grab the folder here and do that and load using that folder, because I know they are maybe inside a CSS folder. So all I have to do is grab the plugins folder and then add /CSS at the end to grab my CSS file. And this is going to work even though I change my current plugin folder. It will still work because this is a dynamic value. But this is not what we need. What we just need is just this part from plugins and then homepage there. And then because I'm using a Windows system right now, the slash here is in a different direction to the one that I may have on a Linux system. So I need to fix that so that it's dynamic enough to adjust depending on the operating system we're at as well. So we can do this by creating a function that will just give us the parts that we need in a nice and neat manner. So what I'm going to call the function is get. So I'm in the functions.php file now, and we're going to create a new function. We're going to call it function get plugin dir, like that. Okay. All right. So here we're going to supply a path here. Now this is going to be in form of a string like that, and so you can do string path like so. Now you don't have to write string here, especially if your system is not PHP 8 and above. This may be a problem, but we will do it this way, and then I'll show you how to downgrade it if you have to, if you find that your hosting company does not want to upgrade to PHP 8 and certain things may not work well. So we will go through the code and remove whatever is causing errors if it comes to that. So this is the return value here. It's a string that we want to return. And what I'm going to do is just say here, this one I'm going to call file path like that. And I just want to return a path. First of all, I'll set it to an empty string so that if none of my stuff happens, I still return an empty string like that. So we set path to empty and then return path. Then we can do some modifications to path in between these two. That way we can get a value that we want. So in here, I'm going to grab this. Now, dir here is showing us, so there are two types of this, what would you call this? A super global, I think. So there's file and there's dir. So let's check this out. So with dir, this is what we get, but with file, we get this. We also get the file at the end there. So it's up to you which one you want to use, but it's the same thing. At the end of the day, you get one with the file name as well. If you need that as well, that could be good. Now, in our case, we might most likely be getting the file version like this because of how we're going to be using this function. So let's just pretend we are getting this as our input, and we just want to get the plugin directory. All right, so we're gonna go with the file version. So here I want to echo from that function the get plugin dir, like that. So the reason we're doing this is I want to see what output I will get from that function as I edit what it has here. Okay, so right now I'm gonna get an empty string. So if I refresh, there's an empty string there. So on our plugin here, what I'm gonna do first of all is grab the base name. So I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna say base name is equal to, there's a function called base name, and we're going to put in the file path in there, like so. So file path, we put there, we grab the base name. So as I go, I can echo what I'm doing here so that we see where we're at. But once we get the base name, I want to get the new path is going to be equal to string replace. Oh, there's substring replace. I didn't know that function existed. But we want to replace a string. So the base name, what that does is, oh, I've removed the source there. What it does is it gets the file base name only. So let me go back here a second and let me undo what I did here so that we get that file thingy back. That way I can explain better. Okay, so what base name does is just it gets the very last item here. In this case, our base name is going to be plugin.php. Just that file minus everything, the folders that lead up to that file. So this is what we get. Now what I want to do is grab this item and then replace it with an empty string. That way I will have only this part here. So let's see if that actually works. Let's put that back, and then here we are searching for the base name. So that's what we're searching for, and we're replacing that with an empty string. And where are we doing this from? In this file path. So I'm going to put that over here like so. Okay, so at least path now has a value. So if I now refresh, you will see that's what we get. So this is all good, but I don't want to get the path all the way from here. Now the reason is I will create two functions. One will have the HTTP path, and we're going to see why that is needed, and one will have just the path like this. I would rather have a relative path to this plugin file, which starts from here up to there. So I don't really need this other part over here. So how do we remove that? We can do that by exploding this part, creating two items in an array, this part and this part, because we know that plugins with these directory separators will always be there in the paths that we are giving here. So we can use that as our baseline. So I'm going to copy that, come here and say if, first of all, we have to check if it exists. So we use the string function. So the haystack is where we are looking, and we are searching inside the path variable. And what are we searching for? That's the needle, and this is what we are looking for. Now, as I mentioned earlier, these directory separators could be different on a different system. So instead of putting them directly there as direct values, we're going to use the directory separator like that, which changes depending on whether you're on Linux, on Windows. It will give you either this version or that version. So that's always better to do it this way. And let's put another dot and put directory separator there. Okay, great. So if we have that, then let's use it. So we're just checking to see if this is there in the string, and if it is, well and good, let's use it. So path now is going to be equal to something else. So path will be equal to another, instead of a string replace, we're going to do an explode. So let's do explode, and we want to explode this right there. So copy that, boom, and then the string is the path itself. So copy, and let's paste over here. Now instead of path, I think let's put another variable. We're going to call it parts, like this. And then finally, path will be equal to parts, but the second item in parts. So like I mentioned here, let me explain a little bit. We are separating the string using this section right here. So this part will be the first item in the array. This part will be the second item in the array. So in this case, we're just going to get home-page and a slash. But we still need the plugin and slash here because that's really the best directory. So what we're going to do is we're going to say parts1 because that's the second item in there. And so we're going to concatenate this with plugins because we know the plugins folder does exist. And then let's do the directory separator here. Again, not forgetting that. Oopsie. Let me copy this and paste it there. Okay, so we get plugins and a slash, and then the second part over here as well. So let's see how that looks. So let's come back, and instead of that, what do we get? We get this. Very good. Now we do have a slash at the end here, and that might be actually that's okay because that's born from the same system. So this is fine actually. This is going to work. So plugins slash homepage. That's our plugin. So we can see if this actually works everywhere by testing it. So this is in our homepage directory, right? So I can cut out this code and go to another plugin. Let's say the header plugin here. So I'm going to go to header plugin and just echo that over here. So let's see what that does. So if I now refresh, you see now we are inside a different directory for that plugin. So just like that, we can tell, okay, this is coming from the header footer folder in plugins. So that actually sorts our problem out. Let me come back here. Okie dokie. I think we're in good books here. Now we can always come back and change it if we find a situation where it doesn't actually work, but this is good enough. Okay, now we're going to need two types of functions, which we will implement a bit later. So one function I'm going to copy, I'm going to call plugin dir, like that, okay? And then we're going to have another one called plugin http dir, like that. Okay, so what's the difference between these and this one here? Well, what I want to get from here is the current plugin directory, right? Now, this is where we're going to have a little bit of a problem. So let me tell you why we're going to have a problem. So let's say here, as you can see in the header footer section here, we were able to get the directory of the current plugin because we were using this this variable here. Now we can't use this in the functions PHP page because they need to give us the path of the functions.php page, which is obviously not in that particular plugin. So this presents a huge problem. So let me show you in a minute here. So I want our let's say, for example, I want to load a CSS file, right? What I may end up doing is this. I can load a CSS file like this. Bring this over here. Wait a minute. Let's say get directory. Let's do this. Let me concatenate this and let's do CSS slash let's say style.css. Okay, so that's just an example. So what I can do is use this as the source of my CSS. So I'll do this and put file in there. So I say get plugin directory, supply that file thing there, and then put that there. So let's see how that looks. So if I come back here and refresh, this is what you see. Now, if this was a valid CSS, there's a valid CSS folder in the plugin, this is going to work just fine, right? But let's look at the problem here. The problem is that sometimes I want to get the HTTP path because actually you can't load a CSS file like this. You need to have HTTP in there for the resource to be able to be loaded. The way we have localhost here, I need to have the full path, which includes localhost. So in this case, it should be like this. So maybe let's do an actual experiment here and see if things are working. So I'm going to try this on my, let's come back here. So we see this is the home page, right? So let's go to the home page or the same header footer thingy here. That's fine. So inside here, I'm going to create a new folder because it's better to actually be practical in these things. So I'm going to do CSS. So we create a CSS folder, and in there I'm going to put a simple CSS file. So this one I'm going to call style.css, like that, and then I will put some CSS. So the only thing I'm going to do here is just say all, like that, and then say font family, and let's put Tahoma over there, like so. So if this works, actually it should change our font for the whole site. So if I refresh, you see the font is to Times or the base font here. But if I go back to header footer here, I want to add a link to this in the same way we do. Let's try, I'm gonna do this link, right? Because I can't remember how to write this all the time. So what I want to do here is do that, put some PHP tags in there, and then do this. So I'm gonna grab this one here, copy that and paste it there, and then close that tag like so. Okay, so I'm gonna remove this for a bit. Okay, so what we're doing is just loading this file over here. So get plugin CSS style. This should work just fine. So let me come back here and refresh. So if I refresh, you see that now the styles have changed, which is a good thing. So this is all good and everything, but the problem is I have to put in this all the time, this file thingy here, in order for it to work. I want it to work without this. I want it to be like this, where I say get plugin directory, and then I concatenate to it like so. This is what I want. So in order for me to get this, it means, because this is a constant, you see, we're going to have to put this all the time, the same exact value. But then it means we can simply just put it directly in the function, right? So let's try that. So what I will do is, wait a second, and actually wait a minute, how did this work? Oh, so Right. So it actually worked to load the CSS file like this, which I'm surprised it actually did, because we're supposed to, depending on how we set up the htaccess file here. Oh, because it's I think because this is a wait a second, this is not supposed to work. So it works on the header footer. So what I'm going to do is an experiment. Let me try a different page. Let me just type some gibberish here and just press enter. Okay, so it still works over here as well, which is weird that it actually works. It's not supposed to work. So let me go ahead and just inspect this. Let me go to the page source. So the page source is, oh, I see. Okay, so we have a relative path here, and this is why I guess it's working. But if you have images, for example, this would be a problem. Let's try with images and see. I want to make a case why we need the direct path and the HTTP path as well. So let me try and load an image here. So what I will do is go to this. Instead of CSS, I'm going to right click, new folder, and let's do images there. Okay, because if it works, then it's going to be disappointing for me, considering I'm trying to make a case here that it can't work. Okay, so let me just grab one of these images over here and come back to my folder, and right click, open folder, and let's put that image. I'm going to change its name to just image.png. That way it's easier to deal with. So over here I want to do this, instead of CSS, I'm going to do images, and this is going to be image.png, like that. And then this whole thing, instead of a CSS, because this is harder to see, I want to just put an image. So let me put a style to limit its width to 200 pixels, like that. And then inside the source I will put this. We are replacing source with href, or replacing href with source over here. Then let me do that. Okay, so we have this and images, and then great. So that should load, I guess. Let's come back and let me refresh. All right, so it loads just fine over here, which is weird. Okay, so let me try another slash here. Let me put something else. Aha, so that's what I was looking for right there. I was beginning to think maybe yeah, okay, so there it is. So when we put a slash, one thing here, that's fine because it's following this folder. But the moment we add several slashes at the top here, it gets lost, because what's happening is the browser is trying to find this image in this particular folder that's in the URL here. It thinks this there is an actual folder, and this is an actual folder, and that's where it's trying to find the image. So the solution to this is to give an absolute path to this image instead. So if I inspect over here, maybe not inspect, let's go with view page source instead. Let's go here. So please bear with me for taking too long on explaining these things, but it's really important that you understand what's going on. So image source here, there's plugin and all of that. Now if I add an absolute path to this image, it's gonna find it. Okay, that's what I need to do, but the path has to be HTTP. So if I try, for example, let's go back here to our functions here. Okay, so there is a path here. If I just return this here, right, let me just return this at this point, then I'm gonna get a very different path. So let me come back here and let's see what happens. Okay, so if I refresh, you will see that now I'm using an absolute path to the image. This is indeed the correct path to the image. You see it says c/zamp htdocs plugin php, which is correct, and then plugin/header-footer, which is the folder of the plugin, right? And then inside there's images and image.php. So this is exactly the correct path to the file. However, if I refresh, you see it still doesn't show me the image. Now the reason is that to grab items from the server, you have to go through the server. So instead of adding a path like this, the path before htdocs here should be localhost instead. So we need to invoke the root path that we are using, that we created inside our, did we actually create it? Yes, we have to involve this guy over here, root, because this goes through our http:/localhost/plugin.php. So this is the point I'm trying to drive here, why we need this function and this one here. So there's going to be one function which gives us the path like this one, which is this, and this path is good for including files, because you don't want to use your HTTP path when you're including another PHP file, because they need to be processed before it's included, and you don't want that, because everything you pass through the server is processed as PHP, but you want to include the file just as the code as text itself. So you're going to have to use this actual path like this one. But then when you're including images, you have to use the HTTP path instead. So if I were to use the HTTP path here, I would get this image. So let me show you that exactly here. I'm going to come back to my header footer here. Now, instead of me having to use this, I'll just type in the actual, what do I use here? Let me use root instead. So here I'm going to say root, because I know root already contains the path up to the plugin.php there. And so once I have root, all I need to put here is plugins, actually a slash, and then say plugins, and then slash, and then header dash footer, like that, and then slash. So this will actually give me the path to the image, but through the server, through the localhost system. So I'm getting exactly this. Only thing I'm doing is I'm replacing this part with localhost. So now if I refresh, you see that's what has happened here. I've changed this to http localhost plugin.php. So this is exactly the same path to the same image, only this time we're using the server to go through. So if I refresh, now you see the image is showing regardless what I type in the URL there, it will still show, because this is an absolute path to the image but going through the server. So that's what you need. This is why you need the HTTP version of things sometimes, and then sometimes when including files you need the non-HTTP version. So let me remove this. Hopefully that has driven the point across. And so in this case, this is why we need these two functions over here. Now, to again go back to the point here, let me actually just undo here, because I need this back. So I'm going to grab this and remove that, and then come back here. So I want to echo this one more time, like so. Okay, so if I echo that, now like I said, this is all fine, but the problem is every time we use this function, we have to add this thing there. This is a waste of space, because we're always going to add this thing. Why not add this inside the function itself? So in this case, what I want to do is, instead of using this function here, let me use a different one. And this is going to be this one, plugin dir. So this one, all I need to do is say, I want to get the current plugins directory. So all I need to do is return. Let me do this, return. So I want to return this function, the result of this function. So I'm going to copy that and put it here. But then within here, I will do that dir thing. So essentially, I'm doing this here. See this? That's what I'm doing there. So I'm going to copy that and put it here, like so. Okay, so I want it to give me the plugin directory from there. So I'll do this. Because this function is complete, I don't want to edit this. I want to edit this one instead. So if I come back to here, and just say get plugin dir, right? Or just plugin dir like that. Okay, that's all I need because that's the function name here. And it's just going to call this one and do its thing. But let's see what value it returns. So as you can see now, it's returning this. The core folder has the plugin directory, right? Even though I am running this function within the header footer plugin, I'm saying echo the plugin, the current plugin dir, but because this file thingy is being taken from the functions.php, that's why it's returning the folder for the functions.php file. What this really means is that we are stuck to using this file thing within the same plugin that we are trying to know where it comes from, right? So, which means we have to always do this, which I actually do not like. Now, if you want to be able to do that in your system, that's fine. You can do it, but it gets a little bit old after a while. So I want to be able to do this, but within this functions folder. So this, when I was creating this thing, this actually gave me quite a bit of a headache to figure out, but eventually I did figure it out. So what I did was, let's come back here instead. Let's do this. So what I will do here is I'll just say return, first of all, so that we can see what's being returned. Now, there's a function called debug backtrace, like so. Okay, so let me come back to header footer here. Now, instead of this, what I want to do is do a dd like that, because our dd function is what echoes arrays, because this will return an array. So essentially, this function called debug backtrace shows you the path that the PHP system has taken to get to this file. So let me show you that just now. So if I refresh, this is what I get. So it shows me what file I loaded first and in sequence. So first of all here, this is the file that we loaded first. That's the index.php. Okay, great. After that, the functions.php file was loaded. That's great. And then we had this guy over here, which is inside the header footer plugin. So using this backtrace here, this is like backtracking and checking your steps. What did we do and then what did we do next? This can be used for debugging to know where the error occurred and stuff like that. But we're going to use it for something else. We're going to grab the last item that was in the backtrace here, because inside this is where we have the file name to the plugin that was last used in this case, right? So then this is the path that we want instead of using that dir thing. Okay, so hopefully that's understood. This is what we're going to use. But creating a function that gets this is a whole nother topic, or it'll take a bit of it, some explaining to do. So let's do that in the next video.